Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen, and today we're going to be reading from the book of Esther, and we're going to be focusing on the story of Esther, specifically where it says, for such a time as this. God had a purpose for Esther, and we will get to see what that is. I hope you enjoy. I'm creating this art piece with colored pencils. I always do the base with markers because they speed up the process so much. I truly hope you enjoy and stick till the end. The story of Esther, we find it in the book of Esther. And she was actually named Hadassah. That was her Jew name. And she was an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. Mordecai grew up in Jerusalem, and unfortunately, in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, they were taken captive from Jerusalem and brought into Persia. And now here in Persia, they lived, and he raised up Esther as his own daughter. The Bible tells us that Esther was a fair and a beautiful girl. In those times, in Persia, King Phasaelus, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing the names right, they're really hard. So King Phasaelus was a very wealthy man, and he would do these parties to show off his wealth, to just kind of enjoy his riches and everything that he had. And one time he had made this party which went over 180 days. All the people, they were drinking, they were eating, they were enjoying themselves. And on this specific night, he was drunk, and he called for his wife, Queen Vashti, to be called and come and show off her beauty. But the queen was having her own party with the women, and she refused to come. So obviously this humiliated the king, and he was not very happy about it. And the wise men also said that her behavior could start influencing the women and all the people to disobey and despise their husbands, so there had to be consequences. Of course, the king was not happy, so he agrees with them and decides to look for himself a new wife, and he gives a decree into all the people in the province and in the nations that he was king over, to gather all the fair and beautiful women to be brought to him, so that he may choose one to be his wife and to be the next queen, because Vashti, obviously in his eyes, was not fit to be a queen. Of course, they went and gathered all the fair young virgins, and one of them was Esther. And Esther and other virgins were brought into the house of the king, into his palace. They went through this purification process where they were being purified with oil of myrrh, and for 6 months, and for another 6 months with sweet odors. So there was like this whole preparation that they had to go through before they even went to spend the night with the king. Before they even went through this purification process, Esther was presented to the king. The Bible tells us she pleased him, she pleased the king, and she obtained kindness of him. And she was given the best place of the house. She obtained favor in the sight of all that looked on her. That's how beautiful she was. And maybe even, I believe it's not just the outward beauty, but maybe even her presence was a presence of gentleness, a presence of meekness, a presence of class. Class is timeless. So after the purification process, the women or the virgins would go and spend the night with the king, and the king would decide if he wanted to keep them or make them his wife. And in this case, he decided that Esther was the one he wanted to make his wife. It tells us like the king loved Esther above all women and obtained favor and grace in his sight more than all the other virgins. Now, there was this man called Haman. He was an official in the king's court, so he had a high position close to the king, and he really was a man who loved power. So Haman demanded this respect and this awe from people, that they should bow down to him as he crossed by, and they should respect him and all of this. And he felt himself like he was really a prideful man when you read the story. When Mordecai would not bow down to him, believing in God, nor would he give him the respect that Haman expected him to give him, it angered Haman, and he was not happy about this. And even though he had all these great positions close to the king as an official, he still really was bothered by the fact that Mordecai would not bow down to him. And so he thought of a way to destroy him And one of the ways he thought of destroying him was destroying his people, all the Jews in the nation, in the province. He decided that, you know what, these people don't benefit me anything. I don't like them. I don't like Mordecai, so I'm just going to destroy them. Haman decided to go unto King Ahasuerus and said unto him, this we find in the book of Esther chapter 3 verse 8 to 9. And I'm going to read it. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. Like, don't tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasures. So the king took off his ring and gave it to Haman and said, you know what you say sounds reasonable. Go and write a decree and seal it with the king's ring. And one thing we need to understand about the king's ring, once a letter was sealed with the king's ring, it could not be reversed. Like, that was it. When it's sealed. And Haman knew that. Haman, of course, now sends the letters sealed with the king's ring and sends it to all the provinces and to all the people. And the letters reach the Jews, and of course they are very sad and they are mourning and they're weeping, and Mordecai as well, and he rents his clothes and cries out and goes to Esther to ask her to please make a supplication to the king and to make a request to the king that this decree be changed. When he comes to Esther, he can't enter into the house of Esther because he has rent his clothes, and he is just saying, like, you need to listen, you need to go to the king, you need to do this. This is very serious. All the Jews are gonna die if you don't do anything. So Esther at first hesitated because she was like, how can I go to the king just like that? We look at Esther chapter 4 verses 11 to 14. It reads, all the king's servants and the people of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his, to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So Esther is trying to tell Mordecai, like, hey, I can be killed if I just go in there without him calling me. If he doesn't hold out the golden scepter and I just go into his room, I may just be killed. Now Mordecai answered her and told her, think not with yourself that thou shalt escape the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knows whether thou art come to the palace or to the kingdom for such a time as this? So Mordecai is telling her, you are also a Jew. Don't forget that. Just because you're in the king's house, just because you're queen, doesn't change anything. You're still a Jew. And it may come out that you're a Jew and you may be killed as your people are being killed. Who knows if God has put you to be queen for such a time as this? Maybe the fact that you are queen is not a coincidence. Maybe this was God's plan all along to deliver his people through you. And I want us to pause here for a minute, because how many of us have been put in a position where God wants to use us and use our position to protect someone, to deliver someone? God already had started preparing deliverance for the Jews through Esther long before she knew why. Sometimes God will put us in positions where he will use us later on, but we have to be obedient to him. We have to be close to him. We have to be in a place where we will be able to listen and understand and obey his will, so that we may protect someone. Maybe it's in the workplace and someone is being bullied, and you can stand up for them because of your position at work. Maybe it's in your community and you have a past that someone can relate to and you can relate to them, and God is going to use you to help them heal because they feel understood. It can be whatever. After Mordecai told her that she was made to be queen for such a time as this, Esther started to understand the importance of her speaking up. And she saw the two options that she had. She could either die silent with all the other Jews, or she could risk dying by speaking up and trusting God. God could deliver her and her people. So she said, you know what? Let's do this. You go and tell all the people, all the Jews, to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. No food, no water. And then after the third day, I'm going to go into the king's court. If I die, I die. So after 3 days of fasting, she goes into the king's court. And the Bible tells us when the king saw her, she obtained favor in his sight, and he held out the golden scepter. God had already made people favor her long before that day that she went to make supplication to the king for her people. The first moment the king saw her, she found favor, that she received the best place in the house. After the purification process, the king loved her and favored her above all other virgins and made her queen. All this favor was God preparing her for this day. This day she found favor again in the king's sight, and he extended on to her and she was not killed. So after that, the king asked her, like, what can I do for you? I will give you anything, even up to half of the kingdom. Like, that's how much grace and favor she found in him. And she said, I would like to invite you and your official Haman to dinner. So she invited them for 2 days in a row for dinner. And of course, Haman was feeling himself. He was like, yes, you know what? Nobody's ever invited to eat and drink with the king, but I am. After the second dinner, Esther finally told the king what had brought her to him. And she revealed that she was a Jew and there was someone who was persecuting the Jews and destroying them, and she could not just stand by and do nothing. And of course, the king was like, what? Who wants to destroy your people and you? And she was like, it's your official Haman who wants to do this wicked thing onto my people. Now the king was so angry. The king was like, no. First of all, he got to be punished for this. And Haman had prepared this whole hanging thing for Mordecai when he would be killed. The king said, you know what? Instead of Mordecai, you're the one who prepared it. You're the one who's going to hang on it. So he hanged Haman on it. We remember that because of the king's ring, the decree could not be reversed. So the king told Mordecai and Esther to write letters that the Jews may now defend themselves, that anybody who tries to come against them, they can fight them. So Mordecai and Esther wrote those letters. They sealed them with the king's ring, and the Jews had a fighting chance now. And the Bible tells us that after this decree went out, many of the people started becoming Jews because they were so afraid of the Jews. You know, when God is with you, you are intimidating because of the power that is behind you. You're intimidating to the people, to your enemies. And I find it funny that they now started becoming Jews. Even though the first decree had been to kill all the Jews, now they were more afraid of God than they were of the people. And that just goes to show that there's no one greater than our God. There's no one. If you ever try to come against God, you're always going to lose, because God is God. God is God. And I just thank God for this story, because it reminds us, first of all, that God is all powerful. God is all knowing. He knew all these things would happen long before they happened. So he made a plan to deliver his people. And like Mordecai said, if Esther would not have agreed, because we still have a free will, if Esther would not have agreed to be the one God uses to deliver them, God would still have delivered them through another means that he had already prepared. But he knew Esther would come through. Anyways, my point here is that God is good. And the purpose and the calling that God has given you, you never know who you're touching with it. You never know who you're helping with it. I recently heard someone say, sometimes the impact we have on people is not visible. But God is planting seeds, that those seeds will grow in time, and they will look back later on and say, you know, when I heard that someone saying that, it changed my life. It changed my direction in life. So never underestimate how God can use you, no matter how small it seems to you, no matter how scary it seems to you. Always knowing that God is with you when He calls you to do something should be the encouragement that we all need, and the empowerment that we have to know that if God is with me in this, what He's calling me to do, then He has already made a way. He has already made a way, and it is going to prosper, because God does not fail. He never failed. He's not going to start failing now, and He's never going to fail, because He is God. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I truly hope that you can take something out of this. I pray that this blesses you. See you next time. Bye-bye.